Venus, licensed professional counselor, also the host of We Need to Talk on every Sunday at noon. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. If you feel you need a therapist, please go to Google, type in therapy, your city, Psychology Today will pop up, click on that, and it will have all of the qualified therapists in your area. Also, the views and opinions stated herein are mine and Duane's alone. They do not represent the ACA, the APA, or any other damn therapist for that matter. Boom, shakalaka done. Okay, so today, we got Duane from Dad's Surviving Divorce. And I wanted to go over what people can expect when they're divorcing somebody who is a high conflict custody case type of thing. Because I think when people start realizing that they're in an abusive relationship and they need to get out, they don't quite understand, I think, everything that they're going to be facing. And since you've been there, done that, I thought it would be a really good idea to have you kind of walk people through from leaving to finding an attorney to what happens during the court case and all the custody and all that sort of stuff. So take it away, Duane.
Yeah, great question. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. You know, the thing is, and I think you hit it really just right at the point, at the beginning of it, you really, for the most part, don't understand what you're dealing with. You think the myopic view or the fantasy view that you have in the back of your mind of what the relationship is and what you think the person isn't really that case. And what ends up happening is you start this process thinking that you're dealing with somebody who's reasonable, somebody who's really going to put the best interest of the kids ahead of everything. And quickly, if you're dealing with a toxic person, you realize that's not the case. You'll have all kinds of conflict that come up, false allegations, just games being played, the kids being used as pawns. And it will drive you crazy because you're not expecting it. You're not, it feels unreal, even though you're living it. So as you're going through it, you're looking at it going, wait a minute, I must be losing my mind because this can't be happening. Because as Chris, you well know, I mean, these narcissistic personality types are masters at gaslighting and playing games and telling you things that aren't true or projecting onto them. And you're sitting there looking at it going, what in the world is going on?
Right.
I think it's really critical as soon as possible, hopefully before you can find this information before you actually start it. So you have an idea of what you're dealing with. So you're not completely blindsided by it in the process. I need to read that. I think I have that. I think I've read it.
Great book. It really is. Well, it's Randy Krieger who did Stop Walking on Eggshells, but she goes over all of the stuff that disordered people do. And I think it's really, like you said, you're shocked when they start doing the tango. So when you left, how did you cope? What were your coping mechanisms?
Well, okay, that's a good question. And just to be clear, I didn't understand personality disorders until probably 3 years into it. So I was one of those worst case scenarios where I didn't know what I was dealing with. And I was just kind of going off of instinct. So when it started, I thought I was dealing with somebody who maybe we just fell out of love, 20-year marriage, things happen. And deep down, I just felt like I deserved an opportunity to be happy too. After 2 decades of just constant chaos with some, good times mixed in. I mean, these things aren't just a catastrophe from day one. That's not, I mean, if there was, we wouldn't be there.
Right.
It's a gradual degradation of the illusion that you started out with. And when I got to that point, we tried marriage counseling, which was a train wreck. I tried reading books.
Let me interject right there.
Yeah.
Never go to marriage counseling with a disordered person. Never. It is dangerous. It is literally dangerous. They will take whatever you say in that counseling session and they will use it against you. They will use it against the kids. They will use it in the divorce. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and the one caveat and I agree with you, right? I mean, if you're in the beginning of this and you have figured out that you're dealing with somebody who's probably undiagnosed personality disorder, it's not a good move. The problem is most of us don't know that. And to walk away from a marriage of somebody who you still have a strong connection, a strong trauma bond with, what you'll realize later, is that it's not that easy. It's not that easy just to say, you know what, I woke up today, you're the devil and I'm leaving. And for me, I had to go through all those different processes to prove to myself that I tried everything I possibly could.
Yes.
And I think you can see, and I agree with you about the therapy being dangerous with a narcissistic person, and it was manipulated with me. I mean, it wasn't a good situation. You're going to go in there being like, okay, you know what, I'm going in this to going in to win it, to repair the relationship. I mean, I even at one point thought, this is the relationship's falling apart, but we're going to look back on this and this is going to be the pivotal point that's going to basically make it better.
Right.
And it didn't. It flamed everything out. And but for me, I had to, and I think a lot of people in the beginning parts of this, to get to that realization that it's over and that what you think you're dealing with isn't what you were dealing with, it's a hard path to get there. And it's dangerous because there's, like you just said, I mean, things can be used against you. If it's a bad therapist, they can basically re-traumatize you with everything or blame things on you. And it can really, I mean, it can really send your mental health off the pit of hell, down, I mean, a downward spiral. And it didn't necessarily with me. I was very fortunate that all of the people I interacted with could see what was going on. I mean, obviously they couldn't say it. I remember at one point well, okay, let me just to say this. So we started the marriage counseling. That didn't work. Through my work, the employee assistant program, I had an opportunity to talk with the therapist on the workplace for 6 sessions. We were talking about the limited sessions, but so I utilized that. So I was using him to kind of validate what was going on. And I finally got to a point where he wouldn't say, he wouldn't tell me what to do, but he was setting up a scenario. Well, it's like, well, if this is what's happening, this is kind of what it means. And if, I mean, kind of like basically setting a path for me to follow, which I ultimately did. And finally basically said, okay, you know what, I'm done. And the crazy part about it, and the reason I wanted to just touch on this, the crazy part is when, to show you how messed up I was, when I made the decision that it was fine. And I'm actually the one who filed for divorce. I'm actually the one who basically said it's over. When I went back to that therapist, I expected him to be like, oh, wow, you just went straight to 100 right there. I mean, I was like kind of surprised you would do that. That's what I was expecting, right? I walked into that next session I did with him, expecting him to basically say, you were wrong. And he didn't. He was like, oh, he didn't say, oh, thank God, but he was like, yes, you finally, I'm glad you finally saw what was going on.
Right.
Even with that, I still didn't believe it.
Yeah.
I actually went back to the marriage counselor, set up a session with her, went in, set just one-on-one. And I'm like, look, here's the situation. The relationship's falling apart. And I was going to that, not for, I mean, I was expecting her to say the same thing. Like, oh, wow, man, you guys didn't even give that a try, right? That's not what she said. What she said to me is, I mean, we're sitting there and I'm still an emotional wreck. I mean, we're talking the first month of really like, moving out and just everything falling apart. And I remember sitting with her kind of saying this thing, expecting, because I grew up in a situation where I was constantly just poked in the eye, put down. I expected her to say the same thing, not the same thing my therapist said. I expected her to say, wow, man, we only did a couple of months. You guys didn't even, you didn't even give it the college try. That's not what she said. What she said is, do you have an attorney?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. And I didn't catch it, right? So I didn't catch the nuances of the conversation. I said, yeah, I have an attorney. I just talked to him. She's like, when are you talking to him again? You need to talk to your attorney. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna, and I wasn't catching. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna talk to him later. Because you need a custody evaluation, and you need to make sure you subpoena our records. And
that therapist, wow, that's phenomenal.
And again, I still didn't get it. I mean, so I'm still like, yeah, I know, I mean, I was just kim-hawing around, and she's finally like, look, ethically, I can only say certain things, and I'm really pushing it, but you need to, as soon as this is over, go talk to your attorney and have a custody evaluation done, and you need to make sure our records are subpoenaed.
And this is an important point. So what I see a lot of survivors doing is they did exactly what you did, hun.
Oh yeah.
Exactly what you did. And it's like they wanted to fix, they wanted to fix, they wanted to
Yep.
fix. So when you break from somebody who's toxic and a therapist says you need to get a psych eval on everybody, you need to get a custody evaluation, we're not just whistling Dixie, guys, because we see the
Yeah.
dysfunction. We can see that this other parent is really not good for the kids. So, you know, and not good for the, you know, the ex and everything else. So talk more about the custody evaluation, because I've had questions about that. So
Okay.
what was that like? What did everybody get an evaluation? Was it just the kids? Was it just you? Was it just her? What was going on?
Yeah, and before I jump into that, one last little thing I just remembered that I want to mention is that she also asked me, "Are you prepared to have full custody of your kids?" So, and the crazy part is, and I'll get into this with the custody evaluation, there was a screw up and they didn't ask for the records correctly, so none of that got entered in. So it all got lost.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the only therapist that was included in the custody evaluation was her therapist. My therapist, the marriage counselor, was not included. Only her therapist.
So this is something I want to make a point of. When you get an attorney, and I am not just whistling Dixie, you need to get somebody who understands high conflict divorces,
Yeah,
high conflict custody issues. You need somebody who's willing to go in there and not put up with the pretty little tears and, oh, I'm the victim and he's a big bad guy or she's a big bad guy or whatever.
right,
You
right.
need an attorney who knows what the hell they're doing and is not going to miss things like that, that's going
And
to insist.
and what happened on that, I even actually, because I was very involved in everything,
Mhm.
and when a lot of this was happening, I'm like, hey, they're not asking for this. I need to, I should call the custody evaluator and say, hey, you haven't. I talked to my therapist, and you sent them an email, but you didn't send the right form, the release form.
Right.
And my attorney said, don't call them, stay away from them. And I backed off, and I shouldn't have, but
Yeah. See,
you
and
know,
that's the thing, is that a lot of custody evaluators are not thorough, and you need to be thorough when you're dealing with somebody who is narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder or histrionic or any of the cluster Bs. They will intentionally pick therapists that don't know what they're doing. They'll
yeah,
intentionally pick attorneys that are going to buy into their bullshit. Does that make
yep.
sense? And then
Oh
work
yeah.
on the emotions as opposed to the facts and the figures. That's why I'm saying you got to get a good attorney, and you got to make sure that you stay on top of literally everything.
Yeah, it's tough. And I got to be a little careful what I say about the evaluation, because it's protected, and the reports, there's all kinds of legal ramifications on that.
Okay.
So one thing I will say is, if you do get a custody evaluation, most states, the way it's set up is that if you share that document and you publish any part of that document, you can be held criminally liable for it. So
Right.
be careful with it. My custody, so I'll jump into it. So my custody evaluation was a 730 evaluation, what they call them in California. Now, typically what happens is that the evaluator is going to interview you, is going to interview your ex, is going to interview your children, is going to visit your house, is going to visit the other person's house, and then come up with a report with what their observation and their recommendations. I got the bargain basement evaluator who wanted to do everything, and basically effectively was going to do everything in one day. And the way she had it planned, well, the way it was supposed to be is that we were like, I was supposed to show up in the morning. I would do my interview with her, go through all the questionnaire, go through all the details. The ex should have been there at the same time and would have been going through the psychological testing and all the computer-based testing on, your personality and all that kind of stuff. Then we would swap. I would take the test. She would do the thing. Then they would evaluate us with the kids, where they'd watch us play and stuff. And so the way mine happened, my ex, who is a super genius, decided that she wanted to leave the state, gave me the kids the first holiday, and left to go back to the Midwest, right in the middle of a custody evaluation. So when I showed up for the evaluation, the evaluator's like, "Why are you here? Both of you were supposed to be here." And I'm like, "Well," and part of it, I knew she was trying to test me, right? I mean, I knew that she figured, or was being told, that I was a male chauvinist pig, that I hated women, that I was just this toxic, hostile person. So I kind of knew that, right? I mean, I knew that's what I was dealing with. And it started out with, she's like, well, you didn't send everything. You didn't, you sent everything except the one page. So we can't even do this. I'm like, well, can't you just print it out? And she's like, no, my printer's not working. And I'm like, hell, I'll go to Walmart and buy you a printer. I mean, I don't care. Let's just, I mean, I took time off. I have someone to watch, to watch the kids while they're, while we're not all together. And, I mean, I'm already here. You're here. Let's just, knock this out. And I think finally I came up with some solution about how to print the form out. And she kind of calmed down and was like, okay. And I think it was one of those things where she was trying to test me to see, okay, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to blow up? And that's the thing on a custody evaluation, treat it like the most important job interview you've ever had in your entire life.
It
You
is.
want to make sure you look the part. You want to be clean, clean cut, well dressed. You want your kids to look manicured. I mean, you want it to be your best foot. You might as well be going to church, right? I mean, you need to have everything lined up. And in my situation, so they went through all the questionnaire, all the information. I didn't know what I was dealing with, so I was saying things, like, well, I feel like I'm dealing with a teenager, which, I mean, everybody who's dealing with this knows that that's exactly what you're dealing with. But if you're going through a divorce and you've been married for 20 years and you're saying you think your ex acts like a child, well, they're just going to assume that you're disgruntled and you're irritated and you're being, it's your credibility. It hurt my credibility. I should have never said that. I should have just focused on patterns of behavior, decision-making skills, that type of thing, and leave some of the colorful descriptive terms out.
Yes. So stay with the facts, the figures, the behaviors, guys. Facts, figures, behaviors. Really, when you're dealing with the court system, they don't care about the emotions. You want to stay as unemotional as possible with this. You want to stay with the facts, the figures, and the behaviors, things that can be quantified, qualified, seen. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I wish I would have done that. I mean, I think I just didn't know, right? I mean, I was utilizing my normal communication style and the way I talked, or I mean, I do okay because of my profession, but I definitely didn't help myself in some situations. So
Right.
after went through all of that, what she did then is she brought the kids in and said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to watch you guys play a game for like 15 minutes. Dad, you're going to run the game. And for the next 15 minutes, the kids get to choose it. And I'm low key. So I'm like, all right, I can't remember what we played. We played some little board game. We did it for, for 30 minutes or for 15 minutes. And then we switched, and whatever the kids wanted to play, we played, and we did that. And the little conflicts that came up, we dealt with appropriately and reasonably and fine. And at that point, she's like, well, that's all we can do now until your ex shows back up. And we were done. And then basically, actually it ended up being like a month or two later. It was really annoying. We did the same thing. And then I came in, did the testing. And the difference on that one is at the end of it, we had a joint session with my ex, myself, and the evaluator, basically going over all the stuff. It's like, well, Duane, your ex says that you mutilate kittens and, do seances in your spare time, and now I'm exaggerating, right? But I mean, it was just like, it was weird, right? I mean, there were some things where it was like, wow, I'm not even going to go into detail. You can just imagine, you've been married with somebody for 20 years. They know all your personality quirks, all your little things that you do or don't do or like to do or whatever. And imagine having to discuss those in detail with another person,
Total stranger. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think one of them it came up as the evaluator. Well, I guess I need to be careful. I won't go into too much detail, but I mean, it was just one of those things where we went through all the different stuff. And towards the end of it, the evaluator basically said, it says, okay, Duane, just so you know, your ex has told me that she's leaving the state. And I freaked out, right? I was like, oh my God, because I knew that this whole thing, the divorce, was to basically try to get full custody, to be able to move out of state and basically erase me out of the kids' lives.
Right.
And I panicked. And here's the thing that I think was really important on this is I wish I could have taken a breath and really listened to what the person said. Again, like, I wish I could have listened to what the marriage counselor said. And basically she made a comment. She said, because I said, wait a minute, she can't, she can't just take the kids. And she's like, look, or she can't leave or something. And the evaluator's like, look, the state of California is not going to keep her here. If she wants to leave, she can leave. She may not get the kids, but she can leave. You can do whatever you want.
Right.
And so we went down this conversation, and I'm freaked out. And she basically looks at the ex and says, okay, you've given me your reasons, and the ex is like, well, my family is, and she's like, stop right there. Just the definition of family is mom, dad, kids. Grandparents don't count. Uncles don't count. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, none of that counts. Family is mom, dad, kids.
Good.
So you need to come up, telling her, you need to come up with a reason why it's in the best interest of the kids to leave their home that they've lived in, the area that they've lived in forever. And I didn't catch the nuances of that, right? I mean, I was freaking out thinking, oh my God, everyone always says the mom always wins, the dad always loses. She's going to move. I'll never see the kids again. It's going to be this horrible mess. And there were so many cues from that evaluator that was basically saying, if you leave, he's getting custody. She didn't say it, but it was like the underlying thing. I mean, even when I talked to my attorney afterwards and I was freaked out, he's like, calm down. You're okay. You did okay. Calm down. And what ultimately happened in my situation is when I think the ex realized that if she moved, she was going to lose custody. And then what she did, she's like, well, I'm going to move to a different city in California. And then I did kind of call the therapist or the evaluator's office at one point. I'm like, hey, I got a note saying that she's not leaving the state. He goes, oh yeah, Miss X said that she's doing that. I said, okay. I said, hey, but I have a question, because I thought that in California, if you move like 60 miles away, it's still considered a move away. And he goes, oh yeah, it is. I said, well, where she said she's moving is like 70 miles away from where we are.
Right.
And I'm like, oh. And then like another month later, I get a text saying, I've decided not to, that I'm not moving anywhere. And then the evaluation came back saying, basically 50-50. So.
Right. And this is what people need to look into, is what is the geographical definition of moving away, depending on the state. I think Arizona is the same way. I think if you move 60 miles or more, it's considered like a move away, but in each state is different. And of course the smaller states, I don't know how that works, but but it's like, you've got to look into the state laws to find out what your rights are, what you can call the ex on, what you can't, what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
See, the really tough part about this is a narcissistic person will utilize all of this because to their advantage, because they have nothing to lose. Like take the situation I just said. The ex had absolutely nothing to lose to roll the dice on this, because if it looked like it was going her way and the court was going to say, yes, you get full custody and you get all the money and you get everything and you can just, move, well, then she won. Right. But the sad part is that the family court system doesn't really hold anybody accountable. So you can play that game. And then at the last minute, if you say, okay, fine, I'm good, all right, it's so fine, we'll just do this. Then all that pain you've been through for months is kind of erased. I mean, so you've been put through a ringer, and now, and the reason I'm saying this is because, like with what Chris, what you were just saying, people will use this to force an issue, right? Like, let's say you have 50-50 and you're dealing with a toxic person. And I mean, I hope no one watches this and gets this idea to do this. But what you could turn around and do is say, I'm moving. I'm moving to, outside of the area, and, it's 100 miles away, and make a play for full custody. And either if you agree, right, then they win.
Right.
If you fight it and they run through and they try to get you to negotiate through mediation and everything, then maybe they win. Or if they run it through the entire thing and then they just realize, oh, okay, well, I'm probably not going to win, so I'll just, I'm not going to move. They will use this to basically abuse you.
Well, and that's a really good point, is what I've seen these abusers do is that they use the court system as their grand theater and their way to, present how horrible you are and what a terrible person you are. And what I've also seen is that a lot of times narcissists are so cheap, they'll represent themselves in court. Yeah,
See, yeah. No,
sometimes they go all out and they get the most expensive attorney that they possibly
if
can,
they have the
yada yada.
resources, they will. That's what's
Yeah.
scary is when people have money.
Oh yeah. And
Now,
they use the court to abuse, like you said. They will use it to abuse the spouse, and they will file motion after motion after motion after motion, and they'll try to keep the divorce going as long as they
yeah.
possibly can, because their ultimate goal is to bankrupt the partner, because how dare the partner see them for what they are and leave them.
Yeah.
It's a punishment.
Well, and it's either bankrupt them financially and emotionally. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know how many people I've spoken to who, I mean, they're doing pretty good, but they're so emotionally wore down and
Oh yeah.
just exhausted from it. And that's part of the design too. It's like if I can get you to, well, I'll get to that in a minute. If I can get you to get to the point to where you're so worn out that you just say, okay, I tap the mat.
Yep.
And what I was gonna pause on that is I almost did that after the divorce was final. I ended up taking mine back to small claims court because of medical billing and because of my career, financial issues and problems with your record can be, I mean, that's conditions of employment, right? So if things start happening there, there's a potential you can lose your job. So what she would do is she would just not pay medical bills, and when it would go to collections, then she would just write my address on it and then send them to me. So now my credit report shows that I used to live at her house even
Right.
after we were divorced. And I would be stuck in a situation where I would have to come up with a couple hundred, not even a lot. It wasn't even a lot of money, but at the time, with child support, alimony, paying attorneys, paying her attorney, there was no money left. I mean, so when someone said, "Hey, this is in collection, you owe us $200," I didn't have $200. I mean, I didn't have any credit. But what ended up happening is, so I fought that, got her to start paying medical bills. She went after the 401k plan. There was an error in the date. My attorney made a mistake on dates, and basically they were going to give her every dime that was left in the account.
Oh my God.
And I almost, I'm just like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I mean, I remember talking to my girlfriend at the time, and I'm like, F it, I'm done. She can have the kid. She can go. I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Right.
Thank God that didn't happen. This is still before I knew about NPD and what I was dealing with. Luckily, I was able to get myself recharged, get back on track, and I was able to successfully deal with that situation. But it's just a really rough time. I mean, it's one of the hard, anybody going through this is going to be the hardest thing that you've ever experienced. But one caveat I just want to say is every one of you need to realize how strong you really are, because when you're with an abusive person and you're living in that environment, like in my situation for 2 decades, you are so much stronger and have so much more resilience than you think you ever had, that's even possible. I mean, for you to have survived that scenario for so long, you have the strength to do it. You just need to surround yourself with resources to help you and give yourself time to regenerate when you need to.
Exactly. And I think that's something that people don't think about, because
Yeah.
the narcissist will do the smear campaign. I'm sure that happened to you.
Oh, of
And
course.
they'll try to get rid of all your friends. They'll try to turn your family members against you. They'll play the victim. They'll do this, they'll do that. So just remember, anybody who believes their story, who believes the worst of you, is not your real family, is not your real friends. You want to surround yourself with family and friends that are going to be emotionally supportive, and in some cases financially supportive, to help you through this divorce, because these people don't stop. It's all about the win, and they are usually scorched earth policy. They don't want to just win, they want you dead,
Pretty
basically.
much. And well, I would say the only caveat is that if they need you to earn money so
Then
that
they
they
want to
can,
alive.
then and I think, and what Chris, what you mentioned right there, I think is really important. And I think, and if we can pause on a moment for this, because it's, if you're dealing with somebody and they do not need you alive, or they don't need you employed, be very careful, because
Yes.
what she just said, what Chris just said, is absolutely true. And then using the smear campaign to the point that they try to get you thrown in jail or fired, or eliminated, or get you to push to the point that you do something to yourself.
Yes.
That is exactly what they'll do. If you're in a situation where they need your money because they don't have their own resources to do it, they're still going to make your life a living hell, but then they'll back off a little bit because they don't want to, kill the cash cow, so to speak. But
Right. Yeah.
I often mention that because if you're in a situation where that person has a family that has a lot of money, or maybe they're professional and they have their own money and they don't need you breathing, for lack of a better word,
Right.
they will probably try to emotionally mess with you so much to try to get you to ultimately prove their version of reality. If you take yourself out, then everything that they said is now true
Right.
because
And
you obviously were emotionally, not with it. And
yeah,
it's
and
really
that's what they
sad.
want. They do want their partners dead. They do want their partners either to kill themselves through suicide or to emotionally be so crippled that they don't have a life after the divorce, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So I mean, these are things that I think you guys need to keep in mind. And it's not just women that do this to guys. It's guys that do this to women. It's
Oh,
both.
absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
heterosexual, homosexual relationships. This happens in abusive relationships. So
Yeah.
I think it's really important to. I think people underestimate the need for self-care while you're
Yes.
going through a divorce like this. Dwayne's not kidding. This thing will zap you like nobody's business, and that's their intent. That
Yeah.
is absolutely their
By
intent. Now,
design.
yeah. Here's a question. So, how long did the divorce actually take? How many months?
See, it's funny you bring that up because realistically, in my situation, it actually went really fast. And I was surprised by that because, well, well, let me back up. In, looking back at it, the ex wanted to leave the state. I'm in California. She wanted to take the kids and leave.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I no longer was a good source of supply, whenever it's like, okay, her normal tactics are no longer working, as is typical, you're cut off in a second. As soon as they feel that they've lost you,
Mm-hmm.
it's not this gradual thing. It's like day and night. It's like one moment they love you and they want to work on everything. The next moment you're like a non-human, and
Right.
that's a really tough situation to uh to deal with. And then in mine, what I think happened is she's like, okay, this needs to be over so I can leave. So she was
Ooh.
kind of pushing for it to happen. So ultimately, I guess it's a long way of saying we started in like August of whatever year it was, and the divorce was final, signed, everything by June of the following year, which is pretty fast for a divorce.
That's fast for a divorce. I saw one divorce. This is crazy. The ex drug the person back to
Yeah.
court, custody issues, 12 years in a row. 12 years in a row. So essentially, this divorce has been going on for 12 years.
I think the only thing the benefit I had is the ex didn't feel that the court system backed her up. So there was that hot pan scenario. It's like, oh, okay, well, I got burned on that.
Mm-hmm.
So she was reluctant to go back to court. Thank
Right,
God.
right.
And she also, what's another thing that she didn't do that I was surprised or have been surprised of is she didn't constantly go back for custody or child support evaluations and stuff like that. Because typically that'll happen. Part of that I think was because where I was in my career, I was maxed out, so there was no raises. So had she done it, it really wouldn't have accomplished anything.
Benefited her, yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing that you guys have to be prepared for is when you finally decide to leave your abuser, if you're the cash cow, if you're the golden goose, they will sock you every year. They'll every 2 years, however often the judge will allow it. And the sad thing of it is that judges in the past would allow it once a year. I think now you have to wait 2 years, 2 to 4 years before you can do it again.
I think in California it's once a year.
Yeah,
So
see, I think that's ridiculous. And so they drag the person back to court every year and it brings everything up. Now, the other thing I have seen them do too, and I don't think this happened in your case, but I do want to bring this up. I've seen the narcissist encourage the grandparents to start trying to file for grandparent rights. Have you
no,
ever
that
seen
didn't.
like
I've
that?
heard of that. That didn't happen in mine.
Okay.
Partly because her family is in a different state.
Mm-hmm.
They are not financially. They don't have money,
Mm-hmm.
and her father had passed away. So who did have more resources, and he and I got along. So I'm not sure how that would have played out. But
Great. But that is something to think about. If they've got a family that's toxic and if they're
oh yeah,
vindictive, they'll try to pull in other family members. They'll try to pull in the grandparent rights. So just be aware of that.
and it ultimately boils down to in these situations what you really have to do I mean, one, you have to understand, like what Chris was saying. I mean, just understand the tactics that they're going to use. But if you have children, and this is typically where this thing gets to be a mess, is the priority has to be, how do you maximize the time that you have with your kids to make the best bond, the best relationship you possibly can? Because honestly, that is going to be the best inoculation of all this. If they're able to turn the kids, do parental alienation, and get the kids to basically pick them and undermine your relationship, then you've lost. But
Yes.
as long as when the kids come over and the other parent drives away or is not there, and you have a little bit of a time to acclimate, I call it like getting through the Groundhog Day effect, and everything's fine, like you're affectionate with them, you can have good communication, then you're winning. And you need to recognize when you're winning.
Right, absolutely. And realize too, they are going to use the kids as pawns.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's super overt and sometimes it's real sneaky. So,
Yeah.
just the biggest and best thing you can do is keep the line of communication open with your kids. When you are getting your divorce decree, insist on counseling for the children. Insist on it, because if you don't put it in the divorce decree, they'll fight you on it. They don't, because they don't want their dirty little secrets exposed.
You know,
And it's really important, though, that you get a good therapist that understands high conflict custody, high conflict divorces, what the kids are going through, et cetera. Again, because the narcissist will pick an LAC, a licensed associate counselor that doesn't know their ass from a hole in the ground, or they'll pick somebody who is completely unaware of, the whole situation. So you want to make sure you get somebody who knows how to help the kids deal with the very torn feelings, because the narcissist will sit there and work on the kids when they have
yeah,
them, and then they come over to your house and then they feel disloyal to the other
yeah,
parent because now they're with the enemy, and you have
yeah.
to undo all that and hang out with them and get that rapport going again, and then boom, they have to go back over. So it's tough on the kids. It really is.
One thing I want to just dovetail with that is, like, I know we talked about this the other, I think we talked about this the other day. I was not a big therapy advocate before all this.
Right.
So I've seen a lot of people who are like, well, I don't want my kids to have to go through therapy. That's just, they'll think that, and a lot of times a toxic ex will use it because they'll think, like mine did. My kids needed therapy. And, her underlying reason for it wasn't to help the kids. It was to get another person to say that I was a scumbag and that it would be so much better for the kids to be with her. And I remember at one point I had not an interview, but I heard this was going on. I couldn't get the therapist's office or the psychiatrist. It was actually a psychiatrist with a therapist. So I went and met with the psychiatrist, and the guy was annoying. He was just like, oh, well, so-and-so has an estranged relationship with their biological father. And I'm sitting across from him. I'm like, what? And then I finally just said, I'm like, look, dude, I hear what you're saying, but have you seen this? Here's the custody evaluation that you should have, that, because you're the kid's therapist. So you should have this information to see what the hell's going on. Have you seen this? My son he has a disability. So he had every year he'd have an individual assessment plan, IEP. I said, you need to look at this to see the teachers saying he's a well-adjusted, good kid. Does this sound like the person that you're talking about?
Right.
He kind of looked at me and he was like, and I said, look, do you notice that every time that she's the only one bringing him in and all this stuff is happening under her watch? Maybe if I brought him in, it would be a different story. And he's like, you know what? Fine. Cancel his next appointment. You bring him in. We'll start bouncing it back and forth. The psychiatrist would see the kids every, whatever, like every, however often they had to under the insurance. The rest of it was done with a therapist that was in his office. It was like after a few sessions, the therapist is like, you don't have to keep bringing it. We see what's going on.
Good.
So, but my point is, the other part of this is, I kind of deviated, but I want to go back to this. If you are reluctant, or you think that all therapists are witch doctors and, they're pokey and, lie on the couch, I mean, here's the thing. You cannot be the person that's going to explain to your child the conflict they're having with the other parent, because the kids are stuck in the middle. They need to have a third party person that they can talk to by themselves
Trust.
and they can call you a scumbag, or they can say you're the greatest dad in the world or the worst dad in the world, and be able to feel safe communicating it.
Right.
They need that, because they don't feel safe saying that with you. The other thing I want to mention, and I didn't believe this at first, and I'm sure Chris, you'll validate this. I remember the therapist telling me, kids always think it's their fault. I'm like, the kids don't think it's their fault. That's stupid.
Yeah.
No, my kids thought it was their fault.
Absolutely. Children are very egocentric. And I don't mean egocentric like a narcissist. I mean egocentric in that they have this kind of magic thinking because they don't have the cognitive ability to kind of process everything that the adult world is throwing at them. So they do think that, it is their fault that divorce happened, or it is their fault that dad went away, or it is their fault that mom went away. And so it's really important that they have a neutral third party that is trustworthy. Now, let me bring this up. I have seen extremely bad therapists do the whole, oh, well, I have to tell the other parent absolutely everything that they're talking about. No, you do not. It is danger to self, danger to others, or any other ethical concerns that you need to bring to the parent's attention. That is it. You do not have to say, well, little Billy said that he doesn't like daddy or mommy or whatever. You don't have to say that. So I've seen some really bad therapists break confidentiality completely, spill the beans to the abusive parent, and the next thing you know, you've got a huge case of the kid not trusting the therapist, not being able to talk in front of them, the kid being punished because of whatever was said in therapy, because they're crazy like that. Those abusers are crazy like that. So whatever therapist you get, you need to make sure that you interview the living crap out of them, that they understand they are not to break confidentiality unless it's danger to self, danger to others. Their kid is doing drugs, maybe having, promiscuous sex, whatever is going to be dangerous to them. But that's it. That's the only time you break confidentiality. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I remember, I know there was, I'm trying to think how see, the thing is I took that approach with the therapist at the beginning, right? I wasn't like, hey, I want all your records.
Right.
There's only one time I played that game, and I'll get in that in a minute. But for the most part, it's like, look, if there's something serious, I want to know about it. Otherwise, here's the background information on what's going on. So what's going, to the therapist, this is what we're dealing with. And in some ways, I think that kind of hurt me in the initial part, because she just thought I was a disgruntled, angry ex. And I would periodically have little, either like at the end of it, I'd have a couple of minutes with the kids therapist by themselves, or I'd even just schedule an appointment just to talk to the therapist on my own, so we could have a little bit more time. But that's the thing. It's like, I wanted the kids to have a neutral person that they could be open with and share with, to help them deal with the situation. And I wasn't super thrilled with the therapist I had. You're talking about interviewing, and part of the problem is, in a divorce situation, typically, unless you have full custody, you don't, if it's joint physical and legal, you both have to agree. Right. So if I find the greatest therapist in the world and the ex says, no, I don't like that person, then it's done.
Right.
So.
Right. And that's why you've got to give, like, what I suggest to people is that they find 3 really great therapists and they go, okay, you don't like that one? How about this one? Okay, you don't like that one? How about this one? And then if they keep saying no to the therapist, you can then go back to court and say, you know what, they're not following the, exactly.
But the thing is, the real critical point on this, and guys, anybody going through this, my gut feeling is your ultimate goal is to try to make sure that your kids don't repeat this scenario.
Right.
So what our goal is to have them get raised with healthy boundaries, a good understanding of what love really is and what it isn't, that abuse isn't love, that, you don't get your formulas mixed up to where it's like, oh, okay, well, if I'm doing silent treatment, that means that they love me because that's what mommy or daddy used to do. Right. No, the goal is to get them to where, when they grow up, that they can recognize toxic people themselves and build the best life, going forward. You don't want them to come back, when they're 40 or, in their late 30s or whatever, and go, oh my God, I married this toxic person who's abusive, physically, emotionally, whatever. And now you have kids and you have all this crap, and you've just basically hit the reset button, which is what I did. My parents were, I was a product of divorce, and that's exactly what happened. I didn't learn my lessons when I was a child. I repeated them in those same things in adulthood, and I had to figure it out going through my own mess. Would have been
Right.
nice to figure it out at 18, you know?
True. It'd be so nice if they taught all this stuff in like elementary school.
Oh my
You
God.
know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so okay, how are we doing on time? Oh, okay, we're getting close. But basically, I just wanted to well, and then the last thing is again, financially, it's expensive to hire an attorney, guys. It's not cheap. But let me tell you, it is worth it. You get the good attorney. You get the one who understands high conflict divorces, custody, high conflict custody. Yes, it's expensive. I think the retainers are anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000.
Yeah.
Divorces can run upwards of, depending on how much money is involved, it can, if they drag it out, it can run upwards of
Yeah.
$30,000, $40,000. So,
Mine
but
was easy and it was still 25,
yeah, I mean,
you
that's
know?
the thing. And if they try to drag it out and they do motion after motion after motion after motion
Right.
after motion, and then delay, 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 it can get expensive. But you know what? To protect your children is worth it. It totally is worth it. And to make sure that they have a good therapist that they can trust and that they can vent to about both parents,
Hmm.
totally worth it. So,
Yeah.
Duane,
And
any final
well,
thoughts?
the thing I would say on this is that the critical point on this is, or to remember, is your attorney's not a therapist. You know, if you need someone to vent to, find your own professional to do it.
Right.
And you need to understand as quickly as possible. You need to understand the dynamics you're dealing with. I do have some tool sets to help people for the early parts on how to do the communication and how to just rationalize what the X is. And figuring that stuff out early will minimize your mistakes, get you focused on what you really need to be focused on, so that you're making the most of every time you're up to bat, so to speak. You have the best opportunity to make, to hit the ball out of the park. But if you don't, and you're just floundering around like even I was in the beginning of this, you will make a ton of mistakes. You will fall for their traps and take their bait. You will, when the kids are being weaponized effectively, or basically being used as pawns, you're going to respond negatively on it, and that all just builds up and to make things worse. If you understand what they're doing, it's almost like a superpower, even though it's still emotionally draining, to understand what they're doing, what they're going to do, why they're doing it, and what you need to make sure you don't do.
Exactly. And one last thing, do not have communication with them on the phone. Make sure it is all in writing, because if their lips are moving, they're lying.
Right.
So they will say and do things on the phone and then deny that they have ever said them, or agree to something and then deny that they ever agreed to it. So
Yep.
you want to have every single conversation in writing, in not text but email. And here's the other thing, when they start sending you the crazy emails that are going to be 14 pages of damning you for everything you've ever done in your entire life with them, you only want to respond to that one line on page 7.5 that has to do with the kids. You don't want to respond to anything else. Do not give them narcissistic supply. Do not give them any excuse to show the judge, see, this person's crazy. No, you want the 14 pages of crazy to be like, there was one line that I responded to and that was it.
Yep.
Yep.
I have a whole section on videos on that. I call it hybrid no contact. Because if you have kids, you can't go no contact.
Right.
But it's basically, and that's the summary version of it, is what exactly is in that email on that 14 pages that really needs to be answered, and don't take the bait on the other stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Because they will.
Okay.
They'll try to bait you. And
Oh
especially
yeah,
in the
absolutely.
middle of the divorce, they will try to get you to say or do something that they can then point to and go, see, you're the bad guy, you're crazy, you're
Yep.
this, you're that. So yeah, don't fall
Yep.
for it. Also, don't throw around psychological jargon. Don't throw around labeling. Don't, oh, she's BPD. Oh, he's NPD. Oh, what? I mean, we may know that,
Right.
but you don't want to do that, because you want to be as, what's the word I'm looking for?
Rational, sane, and calm.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
that's not the word, but that's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, you do. You don't want to look like the embittered, crazy ex.
Yeah.
You want to be
Yeah.
like, here's the list of behaviors that I'm concerned about. This is
Right.
why we're doing a psych evaluation, but you never want to be like, oh, he or she is, and then you name the.
Oh, because you hurt your own credibility as soon as you go down that road and you start. Someone might say, "Oh, okay, wow, well, where's the diagnosis?" Oh,
Yeah,
there isn't one, and
right.
then you've completely just destroyed your own credibility. The other thing I just want to mention, do not at all tell the person that you figured them out and you know that they're NPD, BPD, whatever. Don't just, you know,
Just don't do it.
yeah, keep
Yeah.
it, use it. Yeah, I mean, thinking from a militaristic perspective, that's like that secret information, that secret intel that you have that you don't share, and you close hold it so that you understand what's going. Because as soon as you do that, then they start, the worst case, they start researching it, and then they take everything and then they start labeling you that as that and showing examples of why you're doing it. Just do not
Yeah,
tell them
don't
that.
do it. Don't do it. And a lot of people, a lot of guys do it, and a lot of women do it too, thinking that
Oh
if they
yeah.
just understand, if they just understand what they have, they'll change. No, they won't.
Well, and let me just throw that, I know we're running out of time, but let me just throw this out here. And typically I think when people say that, they think it'll either scare the person
Mhm.
or it'll be a wake-up call. The problem is what happens is that if they think that you figured them out and you're going to expose them, they will destroy you, because
Yeah,
if they can destroy your reputation and your credibility,
yeah.
then by the time you say what they are, no one's going to believe you, because you're molested your kids, or you have physically abused them, or I mean, they will try to destroy you.
Well, and that's one last thing. I know we keep saying one last thing, one last thing. There's so much.
And
They will call DCS, Department of Children's Services, on you. So this is why it's really important to document everything, have witnesses, have people you can call on, because they will make outrageous claims. They'll try to destroy your relationship with your kids, claim that you molested them, claim that, all sorts of weird stuff.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah. All right, Duane, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I so appreciate you appreciating me, appreciating you.
Awesome.
And thank you for putting up with my technical errors. This whole technical thing is not my thing.
It's all
Speaking of
good.
which, I got to finish this stupid recording. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right, sweetheart. Thank you so much. And I will have this posted probably sometime this week.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.